Hello, and welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, where we take a peek behind the scenes into different fields of social work, engage and inspire practitioners, translate research into practice, and encourage lifelong learning. I'm your host, Marie Vakakis. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Hello listeners, in today's episode of Inside Social Work, I chat with Lachlan Slade about his experiences working in rural communities. He shares with us some of his challenges, some of the benefits, and his tips for self-care and personal and professional growth when working in rural communities. Welcome to the podcast, Lauchlan. So welcome to the Inside Social Work podcast, Lauchlan. Do you want to give us a bit of a rundown on who you are, what you do, and your journey into rural social work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've been a social worker for around about 10 years. I graduated from Trobe University, started in Wodonga and finished in Bendigo. Grown up in Shepparton for pretty much all my life. Have always seen no other way but rural practice. I've lived in rural areas and loved rural areas all my life. My first job out of uni, I really struck it lucky, and I think a lot of that was on account of starting my social work practice rurally. That I became a generalist and problem gambling counsellor right from graduation, and it was a really, really lucky break because it was the field of social work practice that I always wanted to get into is counselling practice, and that really gave me an excellent grounding to, I suppose, practice at the start. Mostly the Rogerian counselling skills, which even looking back, it's amazing how much counselling just relies on the Rogerian basic skills that anything on top of that's a bonus. Started my practice there. I moved over to Castlemaine a couple of years after that, and worked in LGBTIQ suicide prevention program called Way Out. So I was with that program for nearly 2 years, so more health promotion, community development type work. Got back into counselling with Catholic Care, and also started doing LGBTIQ specialist counselling at Trobe University in Bendigo. So after that, I ended up working at University of Melbourne in Shepparton with the medical student cohort, and up until now, so recently came out of Headspace in Shepparton, and now with the Golden Valley Centre Against Sexual Assault. So had quite a few different experiences, and a lot of experience, I suppose, within the small communities that I was working within, working with small communities within those small communities as well. So, lots of variety in there.
Yeah, you said generalist, but you almost became specialist in a lot of little different areas quite quickly by the sounds of it.
Definitely, and I think there's been I'm understanding, and I often look at rural practice as my starting point. And whenever I hear rural practice talked about, I'm like, oh, okay, so that speaks about how city practice is. I've done a lot of generalist work that, sometimes I'm doing some case management, sometimes I'm doing some community development. But yeah, there also has been those opportunities to specialise, where there's more presentations of a particular issue or something like that. Sometimes I'll be able to, get extra PD, do extra research in a particular area. And LGBTIQ practice was certainly one of those areas that I suppose got a big passion for early in my career. And in Shepparton, that culminated in us putting together the Out in the Open Festival. So it was the first LGBTIQ festival in Shepparton, and we I did that with some other social workers and health promotion practitioners and whatnot around Shepparton, and it was, I suppose, the explicit aim of that program, of that festival, was to, I suppose, essentially start with where the Shepparton community was at in terms of celebrating LGBTIQ citizens of our community, which, on reflection at that time, we saw that Shepparton was doing a little bit better than some other communities, because, and I think we put it down to Shepparton having a big history of accepting and welcoming migrant communities, refugee communities, and some things we could still do a lot better, but in many ways we're probably doing better than some other communities. And I think that welcome of diversity kind of translated to the LGBTIQ community in some ways. But yeah, the aim of the festival was to take it another step further again, and yeah, ensure that that celebration went even further.
What have been some of the, I guess, challenges or different ways of working when you're talking about rural social work? So, when you were saying before you hear rural social work, you think, oh, so is it different in the city? What are some of the things that make it a unique space that changes the way you work with people?
Yeah, it's and contrasting to what I hear about city practice, I think there's definitely a lot more willingness from organisations for social workers to get in and do. To, you know, there's not there's certainly a respect for people who have their experience and whatnot, but a recognition that sometimes those people don't exist. So, for me, being a generalist counsellor in a community health setting, I suppose had that knowledge that I brought with me, that people that, some contemporaries who had a diploma in welfare or something like that, which we see a lot more of in rural areas, that, yeah, the contrast between the skill set that I got from my course versus the skill set they got from their course was made fairly clear fairly quickly. And yeah, what that meant was I was afforded more opportunities to, I suppose, take on almost any speciality, follow my passions, follow where my skill set and maybe, I don't know, natural talents or something like that led me to. So I certainly got many more opportunities, and I have no doubt that me being eligible now to become a mental health social worker would not have happened if I were practicing out of Fitzroy or wherever else in the city. I've had this luxury, this privilege, because I have started my career and done my career in a rural area. So I'm feeling much more fulfilled in my career as a result of that. Yeah.
It sounds like you were given a lot more, I guess, professional respect in terms of you're qualified now, we've got a role for you.
Yes.
Maybe thrown in the deep end, but also just go for it.
Yep.
Take some risks. We'll support you. Do your thing. How did you find? And something we talk about a lot on the podcast, and I talk about with my students, is an idea of having maybe not necessarily supervision, but sort of professional mentors or people that you can work with or align with. How do you find that in a rural community? Because I imagine services are spread a little thin and often over quite a large geographical space as well. So what are some of the ways that you maybe negotiated that or worked with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the opportunities I've been afforded later in my career have, I suppose, seen me being able to access much more skilled supervision. My current clinical supervisor is excellent, has decades of experience in counselling through a number of areas, and really couldn't wish for a better clinical supervisor, and my workplace helps to fund that external clinical supervision. And I think earlier on in my career, I really needed to look beyond the social work profession wholly and solely. So, one of my, I suppose, mentors, someone that I really looked up to and who's now a close friend, and I think, I'll start that again.
Oh, no, we heard you. It was just a little bit crackly, but yeah, no, we got that. So keep going.
That's cool. Sorry. I started looking to people from other professions. So my manager at the community health centre was a psychologist and worked in a very social worky kind of way in a lot of ways, and got some excellent supervision from her. I I think too, in Shepparton in particular, and other rural communities don't necessarily have the same coming together that Shepparton does, but we've got the Goulburn Murray Social Workers Group has been around for, I think, about 30 years now, so not long after I was born, and it's the cohesiveness in that group and the sense of community that social workers have in Shepparton is made so much stronger because of that team of people, and they're a remarkably accomplished and experienced group of people, all the way through to mid-career clinicians like myself to new graduates and students. Now that we've got a social work course in Shepparton, has been a really, I think that's, I'm possibly getting a little bit of ahead of the podcast, but that's been essential for my self-care as well in developing my own professional identity, is having those people around me, and to the point now where slight tangent, as I'm known to do. One of my frustrations through my social work has been the, I suppose, struggle to engage in social policy work in a meaningful sort of way, beyond necessarily just writing off a letter to an MP or something like that. So out of the Goulburn Murray Social Workers Group, we've formed the Social Policy Committee, and that's been an opportunity for policy wonks like myself to come together and work on some social policy issues that are affecting the local community. And we put on a Meet the Candidates forum in the lead up to the last state election, which saw us highlighting some issues that were not on the policy agenda for a lot of parties, and some big social issues like poverty, like homelessness, and climate change, and Indigenous affairs and things like this. So we got, I think we do have those opportunities here that have been really excellent here in Shepparton.
That sounds, what I'm hearing from that, many things which are really exciting, is almost as well, if it doesn't exist, create it. So you were saying there wasn't a lot of work being done to push for policies. So a group of social workers got together and created a policy group.
That's it.
Love it. That's amazing.
I know, and it's a very social work thing to do.
It's fantastic.
And a very rural community thing to do too,
Yep.
I think. So it's been great.
I think that's a hard thing for some of the graduates coming through, and maybe social work. One of the things that does us a disservice is we tend to put our clients' immediate needs ahead of our own. So sometimes we don't take that step back and think, how do we band together to support each other to do this work on a larger scale? Is sometimes, if something doesn't exist, sometimes it's up to social workers to create it. Like, we look at a lot of things that have happened over time, a lot of policies or programs or organizations that never existed. Someone saw a need and started it.
That's it. That's it. Absolutely. And it's, I think we need to see more of that in social work and in our communities. It's great.
So how do you personally keep yourself, I guess, energized and resilient to some of those changes in the landscape, both, from climate change, economical disadvantage, the political dialogue that changes? What keeps you motivated and, I guess,
Yeah,
sane during those moments of tough times?
absolutely. I think it's a big question, and I think I've been beginning to see far more um, as my career, as my life progresses, that self-care is far more than having a warm bath now and then and doing a bit of yoga now and then. That it is about the structure, the way that you do your life, the way that you do your social work, that really matters. And particularly, I think, while I've certainly highlighted a lot of the positives of practicing in a rural community, the negatives, or maybe more accurately, a challenge of working in a rural community is that you are you're possibly streets away from your clients. One experience I had in one role, my office was probably about not even 100 metres away from where some of my clients lived. So the challenges are definitely there. So I think what I've done is, particularly now having a young family, spending time with my 5-year-old has been a great source of self-care for me. Making sure, particularly in my work, and particularly in counselling practice, it can often be hard to see when changes are happening. And I think, like a lot of counsellors, I'm in there to see clients making the changes that they want to see in their lives. But noticing those little changes and seeing, particularly in my work at CASA at the moment, that post-traumatic growth, seeing that when it does happen, relying on the evidence base and knowing what is within my control and knowing what isn't in my control. And I'm beginning to see so much more that there's little in my control in clients' lives, but that when clients do come to me, that what help, what assistance, what counselling I do offer them can often help. And knowing when that does help, seeing when that does help, is very important. I think being in the community that I'm in is also a great help. That forming connections is easy. That there's lots of people of similar age, similar situations in Shep that I can connect with easily. Being able to get out into nature, which, I'm looking at bushland just across the road from me right now. And I suppose making sure that balance is right in my life, and knowing the things that recharge my batteries as well. I think I'm one of those strange people, and you may be one of these people too, Marie, that I I recharge my batteries from lecturing, from, I suppose, getting up and performing to an extent. That my lecturing at La Trobe in Shepparton has been um, an opportunity to give back and see the next generation of social workers come in and put forward my practice in that way. So there's a lot of ways there.
No, I can see that. I mean, I refer to them as my little minions because I feel like I'm training them to go out and do the dirty work of social work sometimes. Um, so that's, it's a lot of weight there on their shoulders. So they're it's quite good. There was a lot of things you mentioned there that I really I could pick out so many of those, but I guess one thing that stood out to me as being quite maybe more specifically unique to rural work is that idea of you could be living close to your clients and bumping into them a lot more frequently. So how do you manage those maybe dual relationships or those personal and professional boundaries? Because for some of us, even if we work 15 minutes, half an hour away from our where we live, that's quite a lot of
Mm,
distance in the city. You can kind of get suburbs away in that time. What are some of the
yep,
unique logistical challenges or just things you need to consider when, maybe when you're working with young people, you might see them in counselling, but their parent might be your hairdresser or your butcher or the teacher of your children in their kindergarten? Like, what are some of the things you need to consider around those sorts of things?
absolutely. Look, I think my when I first started in social work, it was definitely a source of great anxiety because we are taught that we must be very, very clear around those boundaries. And look, I'm not at all discounting that a lot of that is true. I think one thing that I wish was around earlier in my career was, I suppose, a lot of the theories that are, I suppose, certainly gaining a lot more popularity now around decolonial thinking and recognizing that we are all a part of a community and that we all play our roles within a community. That I suppose holding those values of that separation from our clients a little more lightly, I think would be the best way to put it. That certainly take it seriously, but recognise that I used to have a rule that, and I'd talk about it early on, in particularly if I could see that there was some, social circles or some, you know, ways that I may be crossing paths with a client or more likely to be crossing paths. Um, I would have that conversation, and I usually started off by saying, I won't say hi to you unless you say hi to me. But that relied on my memory being good enough to go, I know you from counselling, and not, I've seen your face before, I'm going to smile and wave to be friendly. So I reverted to saying, I will probably wave and smile at you because my memory's not that great, and I wave and smile at anyone that I recognise. And then depending on the situation, I may then go into a discussion around, boundaries that, what's talked about in counselling is for counselling, and, we may see each other on the street and we'll say hi, and that's probably about the extent of it. And there's never been an issue with that, and particularly in working in some of the smaller communities within small communities, that has been more of a negotiation than it has been in some other roles. But yeah, I think being able to be light with that, being able to, I suppose, be clear about the roles of responsibilities of counselling and where counselling happens and where counselling doesn't happen. That small talk happens outside counselling. Um, yeah, can be an important thing to look at.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I struggle with a bit of the same. I think my most complex is adults tend to be a bit more awkward if they see you out in the street, especially if maybe their friends or their partner don't know that they're seeking counselling. Whereas kids will
Yeah.
be like, "Hey, how you going? Oh, everybody, this is my counsellor."
Yes, absolutely. And to the point where some of the schools that I was working in my last role, small rural communities on the outskirts of Shepparton, where I may be seeing, you know, two or three of my clients may be from the same friendship group, where, and I think part of that is because I've found that as I get further in my career, I'm able to compartmentalize that a little bit easier. But yeah, that I'd have a stock standard answer of I can't talk about whether I do not see anybody else in this school, and it's made easier that way.
I think sometimes it also works in your favor the more people you just get to know, because then no one knows exactly how they know you, they just know you. So, and
Yes.
I got a lot of students doing their placements in schools, and sometimes if you're out and about and you're going on camps or excursions or in the yard at recess and lunch, it people just know you from being around. So then it almost puts everyone on that equal sort of footing of, you could be saying hello to that student because you just know them from the canteen line or from camp or at the bus stop. So that almost
Yeah,
reduces the secrecy around it.
that's it. That's it. And I kind of see that as, I suppose, stepping from that micro practice into the meso practice as well. That, where I suppose I don't know about you, but I know that I chose social work for the plethora that it offers. That in one role I may be doing micro and meso practice in one role, and that could be flipping, several times during the day. And yeah, it's being part of that community, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And you can get kind of stuck or bogged down in any one of those spaces. So I guess that's very unique to social work, is
Yeah,
thinking about the interaction of all those different layers.
that's it. That's it.
So you touched a little bit on self-care before. That's more
Mm,
than just a bath. What do you
mm.
feel is something that maybe you said now 10 years in that you wish you knew when you started off? Like, is there anything that you've kind of learnt along the way that you thought, if I could do my time again, I would have implemented this earlier, or I would have done more or less of something?
Yeah. Um, I think, and I feel like a broken record because I remember my lecturers in uni talking about this. I know that I say this in my own lectures now, that getting a good clinical supervisor is key. And yeah, as I mentioned before, the clinical supervisor I've got at the moment is excellent, very experienced, has faith in me, and on a very similar theoretical footing as well. And I kind of wish that I had have started that supervisory relationship earlier. I think definitely getting self care is all about getting balance in life, and to some extent, I did get it right earlier on in that I was offered full time work, but I said no, I'd rather 4 days a week. That extra day a week meant that I could just do other things. Back then, I did a community radio program, and that was a lot of fun. And it meant that, 4 days a week, I was sitting down and listening to other people. And for 3 hours every Friday night, I was making the Goulburn Valley sit down and listen to me. um, of course, they could have turned off, but um, yeah, the the human relationships, making sure that for me, and I know that this is true for me, and knowing what is true for me is, I suppose, part of the self care journey as well. That what's going to work for my wife, who's also a social worker, won't necessarily work for me. But yeah, making sure that I'm having a coffee now and then, having asking for a longer lunch to catch up with a friend or whatever it might be, really recharges my batteries. I've found my love for gardening as well. And one of the other advantages of living in a rural area is that you can get a relatively large chunk of land for relatively cheap. In the grand scheme of things, anyway, all land is expensive these days. But yeah, being able to get out into the garden and grow some veggies and do some pruning and weeding, which some people that might be a nightmare, but for me that's my idea of relaxing. Um, yeah, finding those sorts of opportunities, and yeah, I think also in in your work conceptualizing what it is that you're doing in your work, why you're doing it, and I suppose patting yourself on the back when you do have the wins, because the wins will come, and sometimes they'll be very hard to identify when the wins come. But knowing what a win looks like, relative to the client group, the work, etc., and knowing fairly, and you know, yeah, without over egging the omelette, without overdoing yourself, but also without underplaying yourself as well. That knowing exactly how much your role in that was can be really important as well. I've found, and I think too. one of the luxuries in a rural area, being a social worker, is that the job opportunities are a bit better. That there's going to be less competition for the jobs that you're applying for. So your ability to choose an organisation with the right culture is much easier in a rural community, because just as in, I would imagine, in metro communities, just as in rural communities, there are unfortunately some organisations that have poorer workplace cultures than others, some that are downright toxic, some that just get it completely right. And yeah, being able to, and in a smaller community, knowing who you can go to ask and know about the organisations in your community, and being able to pick those organisations, there's a little bit more luxury to do that in rural communities as well.
Well, there was, yeah, so much there in supervision, in workplace culture, in your own sort of self-care strategies. One
Mm.
thing I wanted to pick up, which a lot of people mention the importance of supervision, and the more I
Mm.
work with graduates and students, the more I see that some of the challenge lies in what exactly that looks like and how do you make the most of it. So coming from studying where you're kind of told what to do, you do your essay or your assignment, and it's very much directed by the